Hello there. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Brenda Earl-Stokes, the owner and creator of Piano and Voice with Brenda. Now, a lot of my longtime subscribers have been emailing me saying, you haven't been posting lately. What's going on? Well, what's been going on is that I just released a brand new album. And in today's video, I thought I would do something different. Usually I'm doing all kinds of music tutorials and showing you how to play songs and musicianship skills and all that good stuff. But today I thought I would give you a breakdown of how one goes about recording an album. So this is great if you've always been curious about it, or if you're thinking about doing it yourself. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you exactly how much I paid for each of the components that went into making this album. So if that's something you're interested in, stick around. So to get started, I want to take you through the process. Like, how do you, go through the process of recording an album? And what I'll say is there's the pre-production time, there's the production time, and then there's post-production. Pre-production is everything getting ready to record the album. So for me, that was writing the songs, rehearsing the music, kind of preparing in that sort of way. And that's been taking place over many years, many years. The album is called Motherhood, and it's 10 original songs that I wrote about my experience, my unique experience as a mother, raising a child in the 21st century. And so all of the songs relate to that concept. I've been developing the music and rehearsing it with my band. A couple of the songs I've played at gigs before in the past. So that sort of pre-production process took place over, a bunch of years. But more specifically, in May and June of 2023 was when I was like, okay, it's time to, get things going. So that's what pre-production is. Production itself is when you go into the studio and you actually record. So we rehearsed with the band, got everything ready, and then we went into the recording studio for 2 days. Now, this is an unusual thing because if you think of, pop and rock musicians, they'll go into the studio for months to record an album. But jazz musicians, since I'm primarily a jazz musician, we go into the studio usually for a day or two, and we record all of the tracks live off the floor. So the studio that I used is called Samurai Hotel. I live in New York City, and Samurai Hotel is in Queens, New York, in Astoria, Queens. And it's a wonderful studio. It's really terrific. And we recorded everything live. Now, we weren't all in the same room together because Samurai Hotel studio has isolation booths. So it means that there's like a room with a sliding glass door or a door on it with a big window in it. So we can see each other, but we have some isolation. So if somebody needs to make a fix, it's something that you can do. When you're all in the same room together and the microphones are there, then there's no way to make any fixes as you go. So we went into the studio for 2 days. We went in with the instrumental part of the band. So I sing and play piano, and I had Ingrid Jensen playing trumpet, and I had Evan Greger playing bass and Ross Peterson playing drums. All three of them stellar musicians and people that I really wanted to have on the project. So we went in on the first day. We were in the studio. I think we were booked for about 8 hours on the first day. And in that 8-hour period of time, we recorded 7 of the 10 songs from the record. And so we went in, we would choose one of the songs. We would talk about it if it needed to be talked about. And then we would do a live take. Okay. And then after one take, we would say, correction, question, any of that. We would do a second take. For most of the songs, we did 2 takes. For some of them, we did 3. Okay. And so other things that we did was Ingrid, the trumpet player, she would say, hey, can I have another pass at the solo? And so if she had an improvised solo, what we would do is she would go and record another version of the solo so that if I wanted to in post-production, I could say, do I want the first solo she played or the second solo she played? So those were things that we were doing on that first day in the studio. All of this was being managed by Chris Allen, who is engineering the project. He is an independent engineer. So, he wasn't affiliated with the studio, but we brought him in to work with us. So all day long, he's keeping track of all of these things and saying, okay, there's 2 possible trumpet solos to choose from. So these were all the kind of things that we were doing. At that same time, if anybody noticed that they made a mistake, they could go right in and do what's called a punch in. So, if Ross, the drummer, hit something on the wrong beat, he could go back and replay that section and hit it on the right beat. So he wouldn't record the whole thing. He'd do little tiny fixes as he went. The only other overdub that I did, because I sang and played everything live right off the bat, so I didn't overdub any vocals except for one song that I overdubbed the piano afterwards because it was a spoken word piece and it was too much, too hard for me to do all of that. So that's what we did in the studio. The second day we were in the studio, we booked for another 7 or 8 hours, and we had 3 songs to record just as a trio. So I was singing and playing piano. Evan and Ross were there, and we didn't have Ingrid on the second day. So that was what we did for production. While we were doing all of that, we would go into the booth between takes to listen to what we had done. And then someone would say, hey, does this feel too fast? Or should we try this? Or, we would kind of discuss, or we would just sort of think to ourselves, oh, I could play this better next time. That was kind of what we were doing at that time. So after those 2 days in the studio, we call that tracking. So tracking everything, I walked out with rough mixes of everything we did in the studio. So I had multiple takes that Chris Allen, the engineer, sent to me, multiple takes so that I could listen to them and say, like, I like this one the best, or here's some corrections that I want to make. And then later in October, we went to another studio to overdub the backing vocals. And for this part of the project, I hired, 2 of the best singers around, Melissa Stiliani, who's one of my dearest friends. She's an amazing jazz singer. And also Nicole Zaritis, who is a phenomenal singer-songwriter. She also won a Grammy this year for vocal jazz. So I have only the best on this project. And so by this point, I had listened to all of the rough mixes. And I had decided which take that I wanted for each one of them. And then we went in and overdubbed the vocals. And so that would require us to go to the part of the song where the vocals are. We overdubbed them. We were in the studio for about 4 hours that day, and we went to a smaller studio. I don't think we could get Samurai that day. And I found a small studio, this guy, Owen Mulholland, who is another engineer and a good friend of Chris's. So we went in and did that in his studio. His space he has like a lot of singer-songwriters and just vocal things that he does there. So it was really great and cost effective for us to do that. And so at that point, the album, for all intents and purposes, was done. And so that was production. And one thing I should mention is, albums have producers, right? For this album, I am the producer. So I produced all of it. I made all of the decisions about the music. I did all the arrangements. I wrote all the music. And I was a big driving part of the, the production and which takes we use and all of that kind of thing. So at this point, we're done. The album. All of the musicians can forget all about it. And it was time for Chris Allen and I to, to get into post-production. And this is where we were doing all of the mixing. And mixing is, deciding the levels of everything, deciding, because I told you that we're like 2 trumpet tracks for things. Well, which one are we going to use? Deciding which vocal takes that we were going to use. Were there any little adjustments that we needed to make? We made a couple of very small little tuning adjustments, or we liked this drum part versus the other drum part. So we made a lot of those decisions together. I went into the studio with a binder that had like pages of corrections and things that we wanted to do. He did some of the work on it himself beforehand, just knowing where things were going to go. And I went into his home studio. He's got a studio in his home. And we went in for, I think it was an 8-hour day. And then we had another 6-hour day. And we sat down together, listened to every track individually and said, oh, about that. Oh, this, that. Can you make the vocals louder? Can we do this? A lot of decisions about how the vocals were going to sound, how much reverb, how bright or dark the sounds were going to be. And so we were in the studio for, 2 rather long days doing all of that together. What's great about Chris is he's actually a mastering engineer too. Mastering is when you kind of, it's sort of like Photoshop in a way, like you don't ever see a raw photo. You see like how everything is smoothed out. And that's exactly what what mastering is too. It's a very, very similar thing where you're making everything smoothed out. You're making sure all the volumes are the same. It's like on a very micro level. And so Chris was doing that the whole time that we were working on mixing. So then he finished a few things and sent the tracks to me. And then I listened to all of them and emailed him some corrections. And then he sent them back to me. And I went, we're pretty close. Make this softer, make this louder, and then we're good. So, by this point, it's December and we're most of the way done with all of that. So that's what post-production stuff is. At this point, I had to start thinking about the visuals, right? And the visuals were twofold. We had video visuals and we had photo, like still images. So this was part of the recording process. And one of the reasons that I actually hired Samurai Hotel, because they actually have a video setup that goes along with their recording package. So if you want, they have, I think it's 2 video cameras on every musician, or 1. So there were 2 on me in the main studio. There was 1 in the drum room. There was 1 in the bass room. There was 1 in the trumpet booth. So that at the end of the day, we had video footage of absolutely everything that we did all day. And I hired a good friend of mine, Erica Capon, who is a photographer, and she does a lot of video stuff. We've been working together for more than 10 years at this point. And she came in and did additional video of things. So she would do a close-up on my face while I was singing. So there'd be the video camera that the studio had. And then it would be her doing, some more sort of specific things. And then she would go in the drum booth and do the same thing, then the bass booth. So she was kind of doing this all day. She also took shots of us behind the scenes. So us talking to each other in the studio or having lunch together. She took a bunch of shots of the band outside that we could use for promo pictures. So that was all part and parcel of, of that time. And I hired her specifically to do that. I then hired Matt Baker, who is, he's also a great jazz pianist, but he's a wonderful photographer. And he had shot a bunch of stuff for Nicole Zaraidis's, her album, that won the Grammy. And his photos are very stylized to me. And it was very much what I was looking at for this project. It was really what I wanted. And so I went into his studio for, I think we booked an 8-hour day. He had a hair and makeup person there. He had a studio assistant. He has all these incredible backdrops and he has a grand piano there. So we were able to do a ton of different looks. When that was finished and we'd picked all the photographs, he sent me, I don't know, like a 500 or 800 photos. And I had to go through and pick out the ones that I liked. It took me about 2 weeks to sit and figure it out, going back and forth, like saying, do I like this one? Do I like this one? And I narrowed it down, I think initially to 50. And I think the package that I paid for, I was allowed to take something like 12 or 15. And I ended up paying for additional ones. And then what he did is he touched them up. So smoothed out any skin things, any lighting things. If there was a dark spot, that's all the stuff that he did. After that, it was on to design. I hired Simon Paul, who's a wonderful designer, and I had him design the actual album cover. And then in addition to that, he also did some promotional materials for me. He did a couple of thumbnails for some of my singles, the YouTube thumbnails. And then he also gave me all of the graphics. So I wanted to have this just as a graphic file that I could embed in videos. The same with the names of all the musicians so that I could use that same font for all of the videos. So that was the design part of it. After the design, I used disc makers to do the actual manufacturing. So I made 500 copies of the album, which I needed for promotional purposes. And I hired a publicist. I use Ernesto Cervini and it's Orange Grove Publicity. And he, sent out the album to all kinds of people and he did radio promotion for me. So getting hard copies or digital files to all of the people who were interested in it and chasing them up to get me some press and some radio interviews. That's still kind of ongoing. So that was the publicity side of things. On top of that, I also had to do website updates. I've been using Janelle Reichman at Ellenize for years and years and years and years. She's been doing all of my stuff for me. And she was able to give my artist website a facelift. She was able to update it with all of the new photos that I got from Matt Baker. and, freshened the whole thing up and built out a couple of new pages for me too. So there's a page just for my motherhood album and updated shopping carts and things like that. What else did I do? Oh, video. And then I hired my friend Jonathan Arara to do some social media posts for me too. So he took, those existing videos and snipped them into Instagram reels, added, like lyric words written into them, like created a ton of assets for me and then scheduled them for me, which again was 100% worth it. So that was the process to do all of this. And it was a lot of steps. It's a huge project to do something like this. But it takes as long as it takes, and you can see we did it one step at a time. So now I'm going to tell you some actual numbers. I'm going to tell you the numbers of what all of this cost. And share with you how I could have saved some money or why it was worth it for me to spend some more money on all of this. The first thing I'll say, is that the album cost me about $36,000, give or take, to make the album from start to finish. It was approximately $36,000 US. And I don't have a record label. I'm not signed to a label. I've always been an indie artist, and I wouldn't say I'm not like super famous or anything. It's not like Taylor Swift has me opening for her, but I have a reputation. People know who I am in this industry, and I'm relatively well respected and all of that. This for me was a labor of love, was something I knew that I needed to do. It was an investment in my career, in my artistic work. I hadn't put out an album in quite a few years, so I was really overdue to do something. And, this is also a business expense for me because I am a professional musician. So I say all of that as to why I spent $36,000. So let's go through one line at a time and let me explain to you, where the money went. So for musicians, that includes the 3 instrumental musicians and the 2 singers. It was $7,800 for all of the musicians. So $7,800 worth it 100%. How did I save money? I didn't have to pay a producer. So a producer can cost anywhere from $2,000 to like $20,000, right? And I used a producer about 10 years ago, and I think it cost me about $5,000. And I didn't hire a producer because I didn't feel like I needed one. And so instead, that was a big chunk of change that I didn't have to pay. So I was happy to pay the musicians a ton. And happy not to have to pay a producer. I did it myself. So then the recording itself cost $8,720. And this includes the studio time in both studios. This includes the cost for the engineer for all of the hours that he did. He, has a sort of a set day rate for things, and then certain things were by the hour. And so, he would invoice me periodically, and I would pay him via Venmo, and he would send me a receipt. So that was what the recording cost, $8,720. Could we have saved some money there? I don't think so. It was worth it for me for sure. And I could have found a cheaper studio, but I couldn't have found a cheaper studio that had a beautiful piano and the video set up. So it was, for me, completely well worth the cost. Going on to the photography. The photography that I paid, this is including Erica Capon, who did the actual studio photos and videos of us for those 2 days. And then for the session that I did with Matt Baker, and including the extra prints that I needed for him, like that I wanted some extra shots, that cost a total of $3,850. And again, these photos I will be using for years. I got the website updated because of those, and I'll be using them as promo shots for years. So again, I think a very, very reasonable amount. Could I have skipped the photos in the studio? I could have. If I wanted to be more budget conscious, I probably could have skipped that. But I really wanted to have that footage. I also, if I wanted to, could have gone for a smaller package, like just gone into the studio with Matt for his 4-hour smaller package and had less shots and less looks. But again, I really wanted to have this many looks. After that is design. Simon Paul, the designer, is in Canada. So I'm telling you what I paid in US dollars. It was $1,800 for the design. That includes the album cover. That includes all of these files of these custom fonts that he made with the gold overlay. That includes the thumbnails and everything. So again, could I have done it cheaper by having disc makers do it for me? I could have, but this was really what I wanted to do. For video, I spent $3,322. That includes having Grady from Samurai Hotel do all of those edits for me. This includes additional things that Erica Capon did for me. So all of that video, I have all 10 songs on the album. I have beautifully edited professional videos for all of them. 100% worth it. 100% worth it. After that, I have the website. So I spent $2,550 on the website. My website was already built and all of the backline was already in. So what Janelle did is she basically just gave it a visual facelift. We had made a few adjustments. I was pretty specific about what I wanted her to do. And I went off of some other websites that she had designed for other people and said, can I have a page like this and a page like this? And so she was able to update all of that with all of the new photos. And she did a couple of other like little, I guess, kind of like fix things in it. And that was a total of $2,550. After that, I went to CD manufacture. So I had my album manufactured at disc makers. They do a really beautiful job. They have a lot of different choices. This is just sort of the bifold one, has the disc inside. And for 500 copies, it was $1,245.49. That also included distribution through CD Baby. What you do is you can upload your stuff to CD Baby, and they distribute it out to, TikTok and Spotify and, all of the distribution places or where music shows up. So that was part and parcel of all of it. So, it was $1,245. If I wanted to save that money, I could have skipped doing hard copies of the CDs because, again, I don't know how many of those are going to sell. But for publicity purposes, I really needed to do that. Moving on to publicity. For publicity, I spent $5,400. And that includes paying Ernesto at Orange Grove at his company. For all of his work, that's radio distribution. So sending it off and reaching out to all the radio stations, getting interviews, getting press. That includes the cost of the actual postage because he sent, 200 CDs out into the world. And again, could I have done the publicity myself? I could have. I have in the past and have had good results, but for this project, I really wanted him to do it. So could I save myself like $3,000 or something and done it myself? I could have. But for this case, I was not going to do that. The last thing I spent some money on was social media. I mentioned that Jonathan Arara had done some creation for me. He has a terrific company that does different multimedia type things and social media marketing. So he and I had a meeting. I said, these are the dates that I want to have things posted. These are the assets. He created the assets and posted everything for me. And he had enough posts and things to last for several weeks. And that was $1,000. He did a fantastic job. And then finally, I saved about maybe $600 here for miscellaneous. And miscellaneous includes like I had to sign up for like copyright. I had to register it with this and that. I had some like postage things that I had to do. So I kind of chomped all of that stuff into there. I had to pay for the UPC and the ISRC's UPC code, like the barcode on the back, you have to pay for that. So there were all little kind of futzy things that I spent another $600 approximately dollars. So altogether, it cost $36,288. And I had every intention of paying for that out of my own savings. I have a business. I saved up for this. This was a part of my plan for the year. But I also applied for a few grants. And in March, I found out that I had actually received one. So I got a Canada Council grant. Which was a wonderful surprise. I had applied for it 4 years ago and not got it, but I just thought, heck, why not? Give her a go. And they gave me a grant for 32,000 Canadian dollars, which rounded off to about 23,585 US dollars. So altogether, I paid out of my own pocket $12,703. If I had had to pay the $36,000, I had saved it. That would have been great. But the fact that the Canada Council was able to give me this financing meant that I could be a little bit more relaxed on some of these final aspects of it. So the fact that I was able to hire a social media person to help me, the fact that I was able to take some of these bigger steps with some more video projects that I have upcoming, it all made sense to me. So I hope this helps you to have a sense of how something like this goes together. Is it possible to do something like this on the cheap? Absolutely. Maybe not in New York City when everything is expensive, but if you were in Ohio or, you know, some place that's everything isn't so stinking expensive, you could probably do this a lot cheaper. If you were doing this as a band, as in not my name is on the CD, but like the band, it's Bon Jovi or someone, you know, like the Foo Fighters, they're all in it, they're all represented, then maybe you wouldn't have to pay the musicians. You know, maybe you could hire an up and coming photographer to do the photography for you, or an up and coming designer, or maybe you could get, you know, Disc Makers has design services that are much cheaper that you could get. These are all things that you could do for a website. Instead of getting a custom WordPress site like I have, you could get like, you know, one of these sort of made for you websites where you just pick a template and put it all in. And that would have saved me thousands of dollars. You know, those are all choices that I could have made. I could have skipped having a publicist and done that work myself. But from where I'm at, this really made sense for me to do it this way. And I'm really happy with the way this turned out. This was a project that I've been kind of working towards for more than a decade. I wrote the first song when I was pregnant with my son, who is now 12. So these were the choices that I made for this. I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, leave me a big thumbs up. If you have a friend in the biz, if you have a musician friend, or if just a nosy friend who wonders about these things, feel free to share this around. I like to be really transparent about things. I think we're all better off as people when we can know the truth of what's going on. And I wanted to be as open and honest about all of this to give you a sense of, you know, what does it cost to do something like this? If you were in New York City or Nashville or LA, another big place, Toronto or Vancouver, I would imagine that it would cost, you know, something in the similar ballpark. And I would guess that most people are probably spending somewhere between 20 and 40,000 to do an album that has this many parts. One other thing, I saved a lot of money because I didn't have to pay for licensing the songs. Since it's all original music, I didn't have to pay for the songs. So that was another several $1,000s I didn't have to pay. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about this or want me to make a follow-up video or something, just leave them in the comments below. Are you surprised by it costs this much? Did you think it would be less? I'd love for us to have a little discussion. Like, in your area, is it cheaper? Have you recorded an album lately and it was a heck of a lot cheaper or a lot more expensive? I'd be curious for us to have this conversation together in the comments to see like what's going on. So anyways, thanks so much. I'll see you next time.